Yeah, yeah. This is really just gonna be like a tag on at the end of like, oh, this is something we would have talked about if it had happened already. Hmm. Well, yeah, no, it's yeah, it's just some developing news that like should be addressed. Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Hmm. Hmm. See, for me, like I generally make characters with very intentional ideas behind them. And some characters, they're meant to die. Like they are there because ultimately they're going to be a tragic character who will never make it past what they need in their character arc. So they will inevitably die on the way there. For a while, I was playing a round robin campaign. So each of us would take a turn DMing. We had like little, basically a hat. We'd pull out our species, our class, where we came from. All of that would just come out of a hat. So you never really knew who you were playing, what you're going to be until you made that character. And I absolutely loved that because I was playing with a bunch of people who, if a character died, they did everything in their power to, try and get out of it. And I'm very much someone who is willing to sit with that and just be like, wow, damn, they didn't make it. I had so much planned for them. But because I'm the person who has like 20 characters in the back waiting, it's always that, okay, this might stink right now, but it's an opportunity for someone else to be able to come out and be able to have their story told. So that's why, yeah, and that's why character death doesn't like hit me as hard, maybe. Like it definitely can. Don't get me wrong. I've had some, characters I've loved who've gone down, in seemingly random fights, seemingly no point for them to die here, and then suddenly they're dead. No one has any divine magic to revive them, and I'm like, well, that was them. That was it. I can't do anything about that now. But yeah, I just look at it always as a new opportunity to try out something else. If I really want them back, I as a DM will just throw them into another story at some point. Mhm. And if it's because I'm attached to the stat block, then I'll do it that way, and I'll just be like, okay, well, I really liked what I was building with them. I'd like to see that executed still. So I'll just take the fully realized stat block and throw it onto some NPC that they'll meet eventually. Or if I have an extensive character background for them, then that gives me so much more room to play and be like, okay, well, now when they died here, who finds out about it? Who comes to try and avenge them? One of the characters that I'd been running for a very long time was Gareth der Nerat, who was supposed to be this big noble. He was an admiral who'd lost a war down in the south, and because of that, he ended up self-exiling to a prison colony, where he eventually pretty much took charge, got promoted after the old commander there died, and was coming back in. And through that all that time, I had his entire family written out, his parents, his sister, his brother, his wife, who he left to go into exile, and all of her family, like how that all been connected in. So I was more than ready for him to go off into the sunset and be able to pick up with something else. And I think that is what's really important is if you've been building a character up so much that you're really attached to them, you have people in their lives would be equally attached to them. So if you have that need for vengeance for your character, if you have that need to see their story finished out, you can always pick up a new player into the game and be able to have them do that based purely off of familial love or off of whatever bonds they've built over the years. And I think that's something that a lot of players, because they don't do as much background work, they're really just focused on that person in the moment who
Mhm.
they represent. And that's why character death can be devastating at times, is because they haven't filled out the rest of the world for this character. It's really just that one moment that they have with them.
I think that's a great point. I mean, as like I as well have a fascination with just building characters. So when I come up with a character, I'll
Hmm.
build it, and then it's in the books for the future, whatever that means.
It's in the
Whether
archive, you know.
exactly whether that's an NPC as you've said, or the moments I do get to play, I'm like, ooh, this one I've been waiting on. It's this guy's turn. Um,
Hmm.
it I think I agree with especially the fact that the more that you fill out that character, the more it doesn't necessarily feel like that character's story is at a hard end. Right? Like if you filled out this world, then a relative or a connected NPC can come back in as your new character, and you can still continue some arc of this story. Maybe an arc of the story that interested you, but as the old character, you couldn't quite explore so deeply. Um, in some form or fashion, whatever that be. This is highly topical for me at the moment because in our actual like podcast recordings, we have
Hmm.
a character has recently died, and it was after direct. So they just finished the boss of their whole arc, and I was like, cool, here's like a fun side quest before you guys head home to do. And she died
In the side
in the
quest.
side quest, and in this, so we're playing Dungeon World, another tabletop role playing game,
Hmm.
2d6 system, and it has this scale that is like low ends of the 2d6 is not necessarily failure, you get to mark experience, but you don't get any of the bonuses. It usually is a
Hmm.
hard move for the DM to make things more troublesome.
Gotcha.
Middle range, there's a success with a trade-off, and then high range, you succeed. So for death
Hmm.
rolls, unlike in Dungeons and Dragons where you roll, you know, three successes or three failures, there's so much opportunity for your team to
To be able to come and
fix
help
this
you.
problem. Yeah, and your team knows,
Hmm.
so everyone's acting. In Dungeon World, you get a single roll, one roll. On the high end, you're alive. On the middle end, you get an offering, a trade off, and he got the player Gabe got the middle end, and so his trade off. I knew his character, of course, so I made the trade off
Hmm.
interesting for the character, and it. After I said it out loud, I was like, "Oh no, I have just killed this character. I know for a fact that in canon the character could not accept this trade-off. I know this, and what I've done is accidentally almost
Pushed his
forced him
hand,
into death.
yeah.
Exactly. But that's I
Yeah.
like it made the most sense, and still like since then I've been trying to think like what other thing could I have
What
done?
else you would have done, yeah.
And I don't think that I would have done anything different. I think all of this tracked, all of it made sense. It's just a heavy situation. But he's doing the thing that we were talking about. He is it seems so far where we've been doing lots of character decision because I have to all these characters I've built their entire class basically using what
Gotcha.
they've told me. Um
Mhm.
and so where we're kind of landing is somewhere in that story, things that character kicked off that we wouldn't have ever come across or touched into if the character hadn't
Mhm.
been around, which is we're continuing that flow in a different way, and that is
Yeah.
fun. But
And I
character
think it's
loss is hard.
important to, bring in still the characters that were affected by them, and have the world ask about their absence. I think that's a really important thing, especially for the player whose character died, is to know that their character still had an effect on the world. That there's still people out there who are going to mourn over their character when they find out about their death, because it can be very hard if like you're the only person who had a character die and the rest of the party kind of just glosses over it. You still need that moment to mourn, and I think that's something not everyone's necessarily familiar with. We've all experienced loss in different ways over the course of our life, and doing that in a group setting can be really hard at times. So you need to give them those opportunities. And that's really what incorporating stuff still from their background, from whatever their arcs and missions were going to be. Like that work on the DM's part is super important just to keep continuity, but also to keep that player engaged.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good point. It's I think in just what you have said, I've been kind of inspired. I've been trying to figure out what the best like it all felt because it was at the end of a session. It was like all it was all hard for us to like take in. And so like the end of it was all
Yeah.
very like, well, I guess that's it for today. We'll go our separate ways or whatever. And it's like,
Oh
we
no, that's
have to
always
like
so bad.
come back and now like live in this state that we
Hmm.
have created.
It's that awkward start of getting back. I'm like, well, I'm dead. What are we doing, guys?
Exactly, exactly. I mean, yeah, yeah, yeah. So speaking of mourning,
It's fair.
I think we as a tabletop role playing community are going through a bit of that ourselves. Would you like to kick us off? Tell us a little bit about what's happened in maybe we'll start with the beginning of what's happened in the past 2
It's
weeks.
been a dark couple of weeks for everybody. So early in December, we can start there. Hasbro had its board member shareholder meeting, whatever it was, and the CEO of Wizard of the Coast spoke, saying that they're looking to further monetize D&D. They feel like it is under monetized. They're looking to get recurring payments into it, microtransactions, similar to what we already see with video games.
Hmm.
And lo and behold, not too long afterwards, they start sending out drafts. I'm going to put big air quotes around drafts here that get into the hands of some of the bigger creators that are
Hmm.
around. And before too long, because those people were signed to NDAs, um, those leaks start coming out. And if you've read the leaks of the Open Game License 2.0, which is what we're trying to push out, it was very predatory in not just for individual players and companies, but for the entire third party publishing industry of uh, TTRPGs. There was a hard cap of $750,000, and if you made more than that, not gross, just in general, a quarter of your profits would go to Wizards of the Coast. Your IP could be you could be told that you don't own it anymore, that you can't make anything more of it. They can reprint everything you've made thus far, and without your consent, without compensation, without any input on your hand. So you could lose everything because they decided they wanted to take it from you.
And they did all of this by requiring you, in order to use the Wizards of the Coast materials or systems in any form or fashion,
Mhm.
to sign up for their. I mean, it's their website. It's D&D Beyond, right? But you had to like, um,
Somewhat. It comes down to agreeing to the new open game license. So we've been working with Open Game License 1.0A for the last 20 years. Like I could pull off like any of these books, and in the back here, it will be the Open Game License because you are required to include it in your book. Now, do I remember where it is in this book? Yeah, here it is.
yes.
Open Game License 1.0A. That's it.
Do I remember
This
where
has
it
been
is? Yes.
everywhere. Well, it's normally on, like the back few
No, right,
pages,
right.
but they also have like advertising in here, so good for them. They're big. They can do that. But like
$1.3 billion
this
dollars
applies.
in 2021. Good job, guys.
But like this applies to everyone and everything. Like I can pull out my Star Wars Saga Edition books, and it's in the back of here as well. Like these are things that have just been used forever because this is what the tabletop RPG community was founded on. Unless I can't find, in which case I'll feel silly. I think it might just state it on here for this one because this is a Wizards product, so they can kind of get around that.
Sure, 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 sure.
But like it's not to say it's the only way that you can make games. There are games that are going to be completely unaffected by this, such as Call of Cthulhu, because they have their own system. I personally have moved over to Monty Cook Games' Cypher system. That's where I'm now building all my stuff in. because it has its own open game license and creator marketplace that I'm going to be pushing into. But the fear was that this was going to go out on January 12th. So in perspective, that was 3 days ago for us now. It was supposed to go out on January 12th, and it was going to be completely official. And if you didn't sign on with it, you couldn't publish anything
Right.
because they were changing it. They were revoking the original game license. And anything made after that had to be with 1.1 or 2.0, depending on who you talk to and what verbiage you're saying. And that's what really scared people, is because that would mean that everything that they've done in the past was now going to have to fall under that, because they were just getting rid of it. Originally, when the 1.0A was made, it was supposed to be irrevocable, but they never put that wording in. They said it was perpetual, which means that it was supposed to go on indefinitely. But because they didn't put irrevocable into the actual wording of the license, it meant that at any point in time,
They could.
okay, right now, it could theoretically be taken away from everybody. And if you've kept up on any of this drama, the original writers for the open game license have come forward stating that this wasn't supposed to happen, that this was never what they intended when they were making it. It was supposed to allow for a creative marketplace for tabletop RPGs to be able to flourish and to make things compatible with D&D, which was the biggest one available, the one that most people are going to be recognize. That way, new systems, new ideas could all flourish together. Tabletop RPGs were such a niche market for such a long time. Like, they've grown a lot, especially with fifth edition in the last 5 years. Like, really, the
Yes.
last 5 years has been incredible for such things. And because it's had so much more mainstream attention, it does not surprise me that this is the point where the big money grab comes in. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is. This was a huge money grab by Hasbro, by Wizards of the Coast, not necessarily by the teams or by D&D Beyond or anything like that. And I want to make that very clear. The actual creatives that work there, that puts the time and the effort in to make things that we all get to enjoy, they're not the ones who are pushing for this.
Right. The artists,
From
of
the leaks that
course.
I have seen, a lot of the Wizards Coast employees weren't even told about this really, or about the
it,
rollout for it
it's
ahead of
seemingly
time.
more Hasbro focused and less Wizards focused,
Yes.
even though when you see it out there, it's a lot of blame falling on Wizards because they own D&D, and like it's just like
Hmm.
we've gone up the ladder a little bit in terms of accountability, but we didn't go up high enough with all of our focus, because it like Wizards is really getting smashed, and while they are an arm of Hasbro, the
Hmm.
the the general Wizards company is really not to blame.
Yes and no. So the General Wizards Company, yes, it's still the management team of Wizards of the Coast that still falls
Yeah,
under, like,
yeah.
being, yes, Hasbro employees, quote unquote, but really they're still part of the people driving this and who are pushing for this. So because of that, like, they've had their hand in this the entire time.
I more mean,
Now,
I guess, like the reasons we love D&D, as you've said, the creative portions of it, the things that like
mhm,
we've been inspired to do, I think still hold true with this
oh,
with this
absolutely.
company, even though their higher ups and execs are pushing for this obvious like capitalistic push of money grab. Um which sucks because it definitely like I mean you've just said you've switched to like focusing on building in a new system, um
Yeah, that's been a lot of
because
work.
it's
Like,
still it's still an unfortunate truth of it, in that like playing in this system you are supporting Hasbro or the arms
mhm.
that have made this decision.
So part of it, well, a lot of what I've seen for it so far has been the cancellation of D&D Beyond subscriptions, which is something I never used anyway. So I don't really feel one way or the
I
other.
wasn't
I
subscribed.
Yes. And for me personally, I don't need like a character creator. I'm very much somebody who will put my nose in the books, go through every option, try and find everything that I like, and put it all together on pen and paper, or on a document. Like, you have the document for my goblin. Like, I just went through and copied all that and got that
Right.
together. But it really is going to be cutting down into the accessibility of the market because of what they're doing. No one who has played 5e and really gotten their footing into D&D through it is going to say that they now just hate Dungeons and Dragons, because that's not the point. The point is that we recognize what they've tried to do to the community, and we can't support that anymore. Like, I'm still going to play stuff that I own. I was just invited to a Wild Beyond Witchlight campaign for a couple of my friends IRL, because they already own the books, and so they're like, well, I want to play it, I want to get people into it, but I can't give them any more money now, and that's really what it comes down to. I'm still gonna, play a Descent into Avernus campaign on stream, because I already own the book. We already have it purchased on Roll20 to be able to use the assets. So there's no reason not to go forward with that. It's just, whenever I do it, wherever I do it, I will be having an open D&D, an open RPG logo up on my screen the entire time. I made a new command for it, like, immediately on my in my stream elements, because this is something that really matters to me, that threatens a lot of the stuff that I've held dear growing up, that threatens a lot of the companies and the community that is sprouted up around it. There are so many people who could lose their jobs, lose their livelihood, be able to take care of their families, themselves. Any number of things could be devastated if that had gone through, if it had worked the way that they wanted to do it. And I understand there are certain companies that waited to speak about this because they wanted to have a concentrated response. They didn't want to just say, oh, this is bad. They wanted to say, hey, this is bad, and we're doing something about it.
Yeah.
And that's why we're getting the Open RPG Creative License, or ORC, which I do love, from Piezo and Kobold Press and quite a few other companies that have all come together to say, hey, we absolutely do not approve of what's going on right now. Let's see. Chaosium, who does Call of Cthulhu, Green Ronin, Legendary Games, Rogue Genius Games, and they've left this open to as many people as possible to come in. And the thing about that is, they're not going to be the ones owning the license. This is not going to be something where, like, oh, Piezo started this, they're going to keep a hold of all this. No. They are currently giving it to the lawyers that they're using, Azora Law, who is going to be the one who actually owns it until some sort of nonprofit is set up, so along the lines of like the Linux Linux Foundation, to hold on to this creative license, to make sure that there's a safe harbor for creatives in the TTRPG space
The Orc
for
Committee,
the future.
the Council of Orcs.
Mm-hmm. And everyone who's here, everyone who's going to be creating it, we're just the Orc Horde,
Yeah. So the 1.1 leak basically threatened to split all sort of creation of using D&D into two, and that would be commercialized basically and non-commercialized, or I can't remember their exact words, but like basically when you have to register your game through them or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
they would, if you ask or withhold any of your content due to a price barrier, you would be commercialized
Mm-hmm.
and be subject
Yes.
to all of their stuff. No matter what, they have basically the rights to your content once you register. But
Yep.
if you make money or have a payment barrier to entry at any point, you're commercialized, or whatever their term was for it. Or if you don't, sort of like you said, when we're streaming and creating this content just sort of live, that would fall into the non version of that. I think non-commercialized non
That
version of
fell
that.
under fan content use.
Yes,
So
yes.
fan content use was pretty much anything where, like, live D&D podcasts, anything along those lines, where you're not actually producing your own material to be used independently of their products. All we are doing is putting it into play, so to speak. It's not like we're verbatim putting it all out into the world for somebody to be like, oh, well, now I have everything I need to play D&D without ever buying a D&D book.
Right.
And, like, it was very specific in how they put this together,
It was.
to only cover, like, print and PDF versions of RPGs. Anything outside of that was going to fall outside of the license use. which is what's threatened a lot of the virtual tabletops that are out there, and why people were very concerned about that as well, because so many modules and adventures have been put out onto those spaces.
Mhm.
And yeah, no, and video games too is the other part of it.
I mean, just so many different aspects of the gaming industry as a whole, and the even that side of the art industry, pretty affected by this 1.1 slash 2.0 leak. Um,
Hmm.
Community outcry, everyone's upset. I mean, I really haven't even seen so many people being like, this is good. Either people aren't talking or it is bad. There isn't really,
Yeah,
I haven't
no,
seen
there's
the other
no
side.
good.
I just like, I feel like they're always usually, like in these cases, there's usually another side. Like someone's like, I
Not
agree, but
here.
it just doesn't, like, I haven't seen that. No one is happy about, like, if you were to succeed and make $1 million on your D&D thing, now you don't. And like now you've
No,
like huge,
and
huge
that's a whole
setbacks.
other side of it is like Kickstarters totally screwed by this.
Yes.
100% screwed by this because as soon as you hit that $750,000 threshold, you lose a quarter of that off the top.
Well, you
So
lose
there's
a
no point
quarter
even
of all
hitting that.
post 750. Either way, they're stealing your money.
No, it's at the 750. You lose a quarter of that from what I've
You
read.
at least in the 1.1 leak thing that I was reading, it specifically
Mhm.
stated that it was all profits post 750. Either way, it
Okay.
doesn't, it's a lot of money. Like if you're making $750,000, you're not making $760,000 at the end. You're making like
No.
$1 million, and that's like a quarter of anything past this. You now have a ceiling, basically.
It and for a Kickstarter, that means the whatever funds that you raise past that are getting sapped from you
Yes,
immediately.
immediately. Immediately. Not that it doesn't particularly matter when they and how they start stealing money. There is a limit, and there's stealing all the money after that.
Yep.
And that's like it's a huge 20 to 25% is a huge
Like,
chunk.
that's
When you're
devastating.
talking almost $1 million, that's a huge amount of
Well,
money. And that's just
especially when
people
you're talking
at a
about, like,
Kickstarter level. That's like
startups.
people
Yeah.
donating straight to Hasbro, and that's not the point of
Mhm.
donating to a Kickstarter, so that 25% of my funds goes to Hasbro, who made over $1 billion in 2021. It's absolutely crazy. Like, you do not
Yeah, and that
need
was just off of D&D.
these fucking pittance. You don't need them from us. Why are you stealing them from us? So community outcry. No one's happy about it.
Huge.
As of, I mean, so then I reached out to you and I was like, yo, we have to update this episode. Things are getting out of hand with
Yeah.
tabletop role-playing games. It affects so much more than just D&D. And then the day after that, they said, all right, here's our response. Have you read
Yes,
into their response?
I have read the D&D Beyond letter.
Yes.
I think the biggest thing that I laughed at was, yeah, here we
Let me
go.
pull that up for
You're
anyone
going to
hanging
hear
out.
people say that they won and we lost because making your voices heard forced us to change our plans. Those people will only be half right. They won and so did we. And I'm like, okay, okay. If this was written by someone on the creative staff who's like, all right, hey, my game that I make didn't get absolutely ruined from this thing. Sure, you could buy
Right.
into that. But
Right.
anyone on the executive side who put that out there, like, oh my god, that is so
This
delusional.
whole letter, there's it. I heard the word and I've used it myself, gaslighting, going around with this letter, which it's
Oh yes,
filled with
yes.
it. It's like, we're on your side. We've always been on your side. It's not about
Hmm.
money, it's about protecting you guys. You need us. It's so tongue in cheek that it's almost offensive at some point. I can highlight it
It's
here.
talking down to people.
However, it's clear from the reaction that we rolled a 1. Now's not the fucking time for a natural fail joke. You natural
Yeah.
failures? Like, what are you talking about?
Like, ooh, whenever a business letter, because it's what this should have been,
Yes.
it tries to include lingo from the community, from the game, it just hurts.
You do
It's not cute. It's really just you're talking down to me
you've
about
made it clear in the past week that we are not in a community together. It is your community making money off of our community. So you
Mhm.
coming in and pretending like it's anything other than that is like
Yep.
rude. We have
And
built our fucking businesses and lives in this community under your foot. Seemingly, we didn't know we were under your foot
yeah,
until fucking a
didn't
week
realize you were
ago.
standing on my neck, but then
Right.
you decided to tell me, so thanks for that. And one of the other bits, so what I will recommend for anyone who is really interested in this subject is to go to opendnd.games. That is the letter that I signed in protest. There's apparently about 60,000 people who have. They've got a number of articles in here, including one about revisionist wizards and about the stuff that they've kind of gone back on and tried to cover up during this process.
Loads of info
Um,
in here for anyone interested. I'll put
one
the
of the
link in
big
chat.
things Perfect. One of the big things that you'll hear and that you'll see is them talking about there was the 1.1 draft. You know, this wasn't none of this was going to be permanent. This was just a draft that was going out. And if you look at the leaks, they included contracts. Drafts don't have contracts attached to them. This was an official thing that was sent out.
Yep.
And that's one of the points that I know a lot of the bigger people who I follow and I pay attention to in the D&D sphere, which is no longer be the case. It will just be the tabletop RPG sphere because pretty much everyone is distancing themselves from it. There, a lot of people are picking up Pathfinder. Pathfinder Second Edition is going off the shelves very quickly. There's big sales on that right now. Um, I have friends IRL who've grabbed the books for them, and while I'm more familiar with Starfinder and 1.0 for Pathfinder, I'll probably be reading more into it and getting up to date on what they've been doing. The only reason I'll always go to bat for Pathfinder is because they have an alchemist class built in, and I fucking love the alchemist archetype. Call of Cthulhu has been another big one that's getting a lot of attention right now because it is free. As I said earlier, I'm going to be going to the Cipher system through Monte Cook Games. Who, if you ever played the Numenera RPG, which was an actual console game that came out like 3-5 years ago, it uses that system. So that was actually my first introduction to it. I didn't even know it then. So that was
Okay.
kind of
Okay.
a fun thing for me to discover. It's like, oh, I already know this. I've played this stuff before. And it's very much more like a narrative focus on storytelling. But everyone is leaving, is what it comes down to. D&D's not going to die, but it's certainly not going to be making much money anymore.
We've been playing Dungeon World, so in
Hmm.
Dungeons, Dragons, and Dice, and the other podcasts we've been playing through Dungeon World because we've been playing D&D for quite some time, and I wanted to switch it up. And with the start of the podcast, I had kind of wanted to begin exploring other tabletop role playing games, but since I hadn't
Hmm.
gotten an opportunity to sort of DM in D&D, and by that point it will have been probably over 2 years because our next arc, like the person
Hmm.
who wanted to do it claimed that they wanted to do D&D, and they still are because they've been putting in a lot of planning and effort. Of course, nothing
All
will
the
be for
homebrew.
sale. It's all exactly like it's built around what we want. It's using some of like old 4E books anyway. Like anything he's
Sure.
pulling is from like the older stuff. Um and so we're doing our very best to like, make sure that that's not for, gonna be for sale or any sort of things. We're
Hmm.
definitely not going to be promoting it while we're playing it. We're just going to be playing it as we do. But my next one was I was thinking about making D&D, but now I think we're going to lean more heavily into the exploration, and that is probably every season. Like this will be our last D&D live season because
Yeah. Centric. Yeah.
there's no point. I have it in my dreams to make a TTRPG at some point in my life, and
Mhm.
now I have to do my very best to keep it out of their license realm and in this other new orc, so that things like it's wild. It's wild to have to switch up so much of what the community is doing and focused upon in their almost livelihoods. Well, in their livelihoods in many cases. I said almost to specify myself. Um in order to like adapt to the situation in gaming.
Mhm.
Like this is us playing games for what should be for fun, some of
Mhm.
us to make a livelihood, but like in the end, it's gaming. It's playing games.
Yeah,
I'd
it's,
imagine to
being able
relax for the
to
most part.
tell stories together. That's all it is at the end of the day. It's telling stories with some dice and a sheet of paper that tells you how good you are at some stuff.
And we enjoyed the dice version of D&D, but if this is how it goes, I can roll dice in another fat form to make the same things happen.
Absolutely. Like, that's probably the most incredulous part of this. Like, for everyone at home who's just like an individual, a game master who makes their own little bits of homebrew and preps their own adventures and whatnot, this doesn't really affect them the way that Hasbro thinks it's going to. All this tells them is, cool, I got the books. I pirated 90% of them anyways. Now I'm just gonna, go do my own thing. Thanks. I can write my own stuff. I have a pencil and a brain. Which apparently you don't have that
And I
second
read
one.
all your books already, idiots. I have all that content up here now. Take them away from me. I don't care.
No, like I do love having a physical book, but
Yeah.
I will never buy another D&D book is what it comes down to, as long as what they're doing continues. And like I said, it mostly affects accessibility because when you have that book there, you can just hand it off to a new player and be like, here, go read, enjoy. Find something that looks cool to you, and we can make something for you.
My
And
roommate,
it's
much
a
like
lot harder
you,
to
has
do.
the full
Mm,
bookcase of D&D books. He just got a new bookcase for Christmas, so bookshelf for Christmas, so we put it up, and now it's filled with the D&D books. But he even said like
yeah,
he loves buying them physically, but he said the only way that he'll be buying them physically now is at like a half price books where, all of the
yeah,
profits goes to
used
half price
bookstore.
and not to exactly. Only if he
Hmm.
finds them and not like as a new copy anymore. And this is a person that pre-ordered some, I think, like especially some of the most recent ones that have come out. I don't necessarily know if it was pre-order, but it got them pretty fast, like Tasha's Cauldron and a lot of the recent
Hmm.
ones. um but no more, no mas.
Yeah,
You've soiled it.
it's just it comes down to a moral standpoint, really. Is, you can still do it if you really want to. You don't have to be conscious of what goes on in the rest of the world, how this is going to affect other people. If all you play is D&D, sure, but most of us aren't quite that narrow-minded or focused in along those lines. Either we play D&D as a pastime, and you get a book every once in a while when you find it, out in the wilds, and you actually care to pick it up, or you're invested enough in it where you were picking up the books all the time because you wanted the new lore, you wanted the new archetypes, everything that goes along with it, and you know enough to be worried about this. It's really hard to find a line in the middle where you're an active creator who isn't going to rally against what is being done here, because you have empathy. Like, it's really that simple. You just have empathy for other people and how this is going to affect them.
Yeah, I mean it's so much bigger, I think, than it seemed initially. It's just it's so wide reaching, and I am pleased that some of their these other companies have come out actually pretty quickly, I would say, to like like post their stance
Hmm.
in the draw their line in the sand, I think is what I mean to say. That's it. Like that's the line, and that is one that the rest of us won't be crossing.
Won't cross.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that never in our history will we watch one of them cross it again, but that's to say that, like, I mean, that gives you a large group of role-playing games to focus upon. If your big worry about switching, like, tons of people are like, "Oh, I'll just switch. I'll throw everything away I've done." Like, you don't need to do that. That's the best part, is that you can keep your storylines, you can keep everything going, and
Hmm.
like if you wanted to be as intense as you could actually just switch systems and like rebuild your characters up to where they're at in this new system. You might
I
have
mean,
different spells, you might have different things. You could also just play it because you're doing it on your own. You're not making money from it.
I think the funniest part, like for me personally, is anyone who's playing 5e could switch back to like 3.5 if they really felt like it. And you'd have way more options, way more to get into. And I assure you, you can find every one of those books online in PDF format. You just have to go looking for it,
Mhm.
but they're there, and you won't be giving a dime to anyone else. Wizards isn't producing those books anymore, so you can go out and find those at used bookstores. Whenever I'm out at like a Bookman's or Half Price Books or something, I always find D&D books there.
Oh
I just
yeah.
happen to normally have them like 95% of the time. The only thing I don't really have is like Dark Sun stuff.
But I'm looking for it
But well,
at the
I
half
wouldn't be
price.
opposed if it showed up.
Right.
If I could get some Dark Sun stuff. I love my Thrycreen, Uh, but no, there's plenty of ways to adapt what you're doing to something else. Part of the reason I picked up Cypher was because it's so simple, it's so straightforward. Like it takes some GM work, yeah, to adapt everything over, but ultimately super simple. Very much, you can build whatever you want in there, and it'll be able to function. If you want to keep the essence of the other stuff you're doing, then all you do is go, well, this is the game I want to play. I'm taking everything from 5e and now it's just going to be in here. Okay. All right, cool. We'll wing it a little bit. When don't we wing it as GMs? We prep stuff, yeah, but half the time we're just coming up with things as we go. It's nothing new in that regard. It's just a little extra effort.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you love it, if you've been here telling your own stories, then you're going to do it. It's just going to take a little bit of time.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really all it boils down to is that, like, I mean, once we get on this flow in a year, this may not be as much of a problem anymore. D&D will be a thing of
Mm-hmm.
the past a second time, and we'll be on to the future of every other RPG game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the content will be being made, and it will be more easily accessible in the same ways that I think you access your D&D content. It's just going to take creators a small amount of time to switch over in like how they're focusing. I've already seen like I follow quite a few like just random D&D idea posters on,
Mm-hmm.
the various social spheres,
On
and I've already seen them
Twitter or
switching
Instagram or
to
whatever.
like rather than their hashtag D&D 5e or D&D whatever, it's hashtag PF2E now, and I'm like, all right,
Mm-hmm.
Pathfinder. Oh, I'll check it out. I'll
Yep.
check it out. It's just, yeah, it just requires a little bit of work and like time, but we'll get there, I think, as a community, because we're all seemingly focused in the same place of making this right for all of ourselves, and taking it into our own hands. So yeah, a little bit of time goes by, and I think that we'll be back on a track. It'll take some time to pick up the pieces, but I think we can pick them up.
100% we can. These are a bunch of creative people who care about what they do, and we have the tools already available to us to switch.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it comes down to. If anything, the most impressive feat to come from this is somehow Hasbro has gotten everybody to finally check out different RPGs.
Maybe
Like
that
that's
maybe that
the
was their goal
funniest
all
bit.
along. They'll come out with another letter. They'll be like, "This was the point, guys. I wanted to foster all of your
Mhm,
desires in all
mhm.
these other games. This was the
We
point."
wanted to
Gaslight, gaslight,
grow the
gaslight.
market of tabletop RPGs. So that way there are more viable competitors, and we just have the best game out
We
there.
wanted everyone to roll a 20 on this one.
Uh, God damn, if they say that. They say that, that'll hurt.
I know.
Ugh.
I know. I'm curious to see how their sales charts plummet this year, opposed to like the past couple years, or like how that's
Honestly.
affected. I'm gonna bet, I'm gonna guess plummet at a pretty drastic rate based on their D&D sales overall. But
Well, so okay. The thing right now is since they've not released the OGL 2.0, they're really just going to wait for this to blow over and for people to not be thinking about it, and then they'll push forward with whatever they're going to do. Maybe to a lesser extent, maybe some of the wording will be changed, but because there is no, from what they've said, there's no idea that they're going to maintain 1.0a. Like whatever they do is still going to be bad, and they're just going to try and let the media cycle, the short attention span that people have, blow it right past them. If everyone who cares about this changes to a different system, they'll just do it without people paying as much attention to it. It's still a very dangerous time, and awareness is going to be hugely important in the coming months, in the coming year. There'll definitely be a lot of interest around this. So with the orc coming out, and that those sorts of companies who were using the original open game license will likely continue to shed some light on this as time goes. But it's a big possibility for burnout on the subject, and for them to be waiting for that point before they do push forward with it, because anyone who's still stuck there, they're going to be screwed over. Like, a Critical Role is probably one of the groups I'm most worried about out of this.
Mhm.
When they did put out a statement, it was rather neutral on this, and it's because D&D Beyond is one of their biggest sponsors. They're backed into a corner because of what they've been doing, what they've been working with for so long. That this sort of a drastic shift is really going to hurt them. It's the same thing with like Larian Game Studios, who is making the Baldur's Gate 3 game. They've had to have, and presumably they have their own license allowing them to do that, which will not be affected by this. But they can't go on the record or go as in support of the new game license that are going out. They can't openly decry it, because if they did, they are going to ruin themselves financially and potentially get into further lawsuits. Like, there's all sorts of danger around this, that even though we have stopped this round of it, we have to be ready for the future of where this fight is going to go.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's important to maintain position, maintain hold, and keep an eye out, because just because things like, they came out and they said, oops, we messed up, they didn't say, like, and here's how we'll fix it. And here's what we
Mm,
will do and what is happening. Instead, they've just said, oops, we've messed up. Oops, you've noticed we've messed up. And we will gaslight you.
yeah,
And
we're
so
gonna
it's important
try
to
and cover it up.
continue to watch. And some of the resources that we've shared, Open D&D, I mean, it's important to go through, I think, and actually like read through what Wizards has said about these things. Definitely check out
Mm.
that leak. Check out their apology letter or whatever, to be
There's also
knowledgeable
some
about what they're saying.
Yeah, there's also some screenshots from Wizards of the Coast employees who contacted some of the major people who've been pushing back against this, who did so anonymously, because this is just what they've seen, what they've heard. You can also go check for that stuff to understand how, like, even the people making this are being left in the dark about what's going on, because this isn't something coming from them. Like, it's scummy.
It
And
is.
that's what it comes down to.
It is. It is. And shocking that it happened, all of this, in 2 weeks since we did our recording, since we like set up and did our thing. Like, I guess maybe 13 days ago or something like that, something wild. And then everything kicked off.
Recent, yeah.
And then
No,
everything got out of hand.
because
So,
we recorded on the second, so
mhm.
yeah, it's been 13 days.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just wild how fast time, how fast time flies. One, and two, like, I don't know. The purpose, right? The joys of the podcast are like how we find joy about these things in our lives, and we definitely did that in recording one. I've just never had something so like hugely topical to the episode actually happen around when we're doing these episodes. So I thought it was really important to come back and like talk about that. I mean, it's important to the whole topic
No,
of the episode, and we talked already about our joys in this thing. I'm curious about how the first recording would have been colored had this been happening. Had today been that
yeah,
recording
it had
day.
just come through, yeah.
Right. I'm
And
just curious. Just
what
interesting.
what I can say about it is, it doesn't change the joy of the storytelling,
Right.
the interactive experience with people that it just brings about that little bit of bittersweet, that melancholy of being like, yeah, that's my uncle. I loved him since I was a kid. We grew up together. He told me a bunch of funny stories, taught me a few things. he's kind of racist, so I don't really
I don't
hang out
like
with
him
him
anymore,
now.
but when I was
Yeah,
younger and
I
didn't understand that.
but I've grown to realize what that means, and I don't really want to support that anymore. And that's kind of what this has become with Wizards of the Coast and D&D. Yeah, you know, that's my capitalist uncle who's gonna try and extort me for every penny I have. It's my scumbag dad, maybe. I've been seeing these YouTube shorts for scumbag dad, which are absolutely terrible. All great storytelling, but it's just doing like scum of the earth stuff, and I've been very amused. But that's kind of what it feels like here. Is like, oh yeah, fuck you.
Yeah, it's oh man, it's effective and wide-reaching consequences, for sure. And yeah, I'm curious about, I don't think any of our other favorites will have huge changes to what we're doing. Like playing Dungeon World, it's not like their book is going to update. It's not like the flow of playing that is going to change. It's not like if you're playing Pathfinder, anything is going to change there. It's not like our next season of D&D is changing in any form or fashion.
Mhm.
Because it's, it doesn't need to. It's just more we need to be on a societal focus on this thing, right? We need to make sure that we're not providing fuel to the flames, for them to continue to make these wildly catastrophic decisions.
And yeah, anyone who is interested in doing such things, you can pull the Open D&D logo off of their site, throw it on up with whatever whenever you're doing things like that. I think that's what's really important is, just being knowledgeable, being informed about, what is going on around you. Of course, we can still play D&D, and we all will to one extent or another. Uh, but just being able to tell people to be like, hey, I'm glad you're enjoying this. This is what's happening. If you care about this because you like what I'm doing right now, go support this. Go check this out. We'll be doing other things in the future. This is just what's happening in our industry, in our community at the moment, and we need your help.
And that's, I mean, that's the thing that this boils all down to, and tying it even back into the podcast is that our joys are often centric around a community that is built around us doing this thing. And quite often, it's like we find more joy based, like the more communal exchange we have on our joy.
Yeah.
And this is just a way for you to continue to support that community that has given you so
Mhm.
much over your life. Given us, I mean, us so much. Indeed, indeed. Perfect. Well, I think I think covers a good response on the modern happenings of tabletop role playing games.
No, I think that's fair. So just in closing here, I have a question for you.
Oh yeah.
Where are you looking to find your joy in storytelling, in tabletop RPGs in this coming year?
Oh boy.
Since I did the ending question for the original podcast, you get to do it for this one.
I guess that's true. In this coming year. Okay. Hmm. I feel a little bit cloudy about our, I mean, I'm very excited about the character I've built for the upcoming D&D thing. I'm very excited to attempt to draw our current campaign to a close in using a new character and a new branch of that storyline. The one that we've chosen, the biggest negative to it was in the past we've done something kind of similar to this, and the feedback, not the feedback, the response from the players themselves didn't seem to go as well. But
Mhm.
it wasn't my choice then, it's not my choice now, so I've definitely made that known, and I think that they're more open to something, and this is much more story based. Before it was just like this is a cop, and you're like, ugh, I don't want to be on a team with a cop. And so
Okay.
that went bad, and now I think that story wise it could go well, and I'm interested to see how that goes. My biggest thing now creatively for this year is finding the next system that I'm going to use. I'm going to be exploring all these systems. Call of Cthulhu has been on my list for a while. I mean, Pathfinder's on there now. I think I was adverse to it
Mhm.
before because it seemed a bit more complicated. Um,
It is. It's a little
exactly,
complicated. I won't
exactly.
deny that.
So it's just it's looking for what can kind of facilitate my love of like fantasy. That's a big, huge of it
Mhm.
is like the fantasy take. But also just like I think using these things to begin crafting the base of what I think maybe my future role playing game could be. That's a huge reason of all this research as well is like finding what I need, in it, finding what I
Mhm.
want, what makes it unique. I'm very excited to begin to do all of that. It's a very like scatterbrained ADHD answer to something I'm looking forward to, but this year creatively, I'm very excited. I think that in the tabletop role playing space specifically is
Mhm.
going to be a good year for at least our bubble in building in new stories and exploring new ways of going about that.
Yeah, you're gonna find new systems, be able to fall in love with new things, be able to test them out. I do know Call of Cthulhu GM, so if you want, I could get in contact with them. Maybe they want to run a session. I know that they've also been weighing in a lot in the OGL stuff, so we could definitely look into that. Whatever games you do run into, we could also do another follow up bit at some point, just talking about all the different things we found over the course of the year and being able to share that. Because I think sharing new games is going to be a huge part of the upcoming year. Is everyone getting excited about new things together and
Yeah,
being able to geek out in that in respect, and
definitely,
that'll bring the community a lot closer, I think.
definitely. Uh, yeah, yeah. What about you in this coming year? What are you most creatively looking forward to?
My plan was to get published this year, so I'm still absolutely going to be pushing towards that, figuring out everything that I need to do,
Like
and
homebrew
just
content?
figuring out a new system. Yep, yep. On Drive Through RPG, the Cipher system has their own like creator portal and whatnot that you can push through. So I'll be looking into that,
That's
pushing more
incredible.
into
Yeah,
that, and like even if I'll likely have my own like print copy of what I do at first, and then I will scale back whatever I need to take out to make it go in with theirs. But I'm really excited to be able to say I have my own book ready to go.
that's really
If
exciting.
only to be able to share, my little view on how a fantasy world should be put together, and to be able to get to share that with more people,
Yeah,
because it's always been something I've enjoyed, and it's always something that's been on like my list of things to do. This isn't the RPG system I wanted to put out necessarily. I had put a lot of work into that at one point, and as I talked about in the main podcast, that's kind of all been scrapped because I don't talk to those people anymore. Um, so, this is really the start where I want to be able to say that I am a, tabletop RPG publisher.
I'm a
I
creator in
am
this community.
I have a stance in this community. My voice isn't just that of some disparate, GM. I'm not just the one guy in my friend group who's like, yeah, I'll run a game. It's the no, no, I will run a game, but I want to let other people be able to run this game too. And that's a sense of pride, sense of joy. I'm really excited about it. I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know how long it's going to take before I'm there, but it's going to happen this year. So that's the huge thing for me at this point, is my resolve about this has just been solidified.
Yeah, yeah. That's fantastic. I think that I think that I agree with that overall. Is that yes, I'm sort of downtrodden about the seemingly loss we're experiencing in this community right now. But
Hmm.
it solidified other decisions in me, being to continue searching into other, tabletop role playing games and to widen my joy about this whole topic. Yeah. So absolutely. All
Yeah,
right. Well
cool.
then, cool. I think that about covers our second thing. I realized that I was muted in the beginning, so I'm gonna do a quick
Oh,
re-record of my intro and how cool and historic that was, and I can just like clip that right over my old face. So,
got you, got you.
but yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming back on. We did this so quick,
Of
so
course.
I
Yeah, yeah.
appreciate that.
Always love talking with you. But
100%,
you have
100%.
a wonderful day.
Yeah, you too. You too. We'll talk later.
Absolutely. All right. Bye bye.
Bye. Oh man. Okay, give me 1 second, y'all. Let's see if I can get my face back here. Face cam. Oh no. Okay, let's turn this one off. Turn those off. And then we'll make me fit in this page here. We'll get there. 'One hmm. 1 second, folks. We'll just do this re-recording for the beginning, and then we're gonna end it. I appreciate Crin making the time, Tristan, to come on out and chat about the modern effect of what we're facing in this community. I think that that is highly important to be up to date on for anyone listening in, and for this to just re-record the intro for the podcast. So this is actually a pretty historic re-recording because we've not once in the 6 months of doing this podcast come back and needed to re-record an episode, but there's been actual modern updates here on our topic. So we wanted to do just that and come in and chat about the things happening in the tabletop role-playing game community. First, though, to warm us back up into this, into the interviewee kind of vibes. Why don't you first? I wanted to talk, it's pretty topical for me, but how do you feel about character death? When you're playing a character and that character dies, how does that sit with you? How does that resonate with you? Boom. All right, folks. I think that that's literally all I needed. I appreciate you folks joining and coming back on this this update for the episode. This is going to be a long episode of the podcast, but a lot has happened, so I think it's important that we include that all. So make sure that you tune in next Sunday when that releases. And yeah, I hope that you folks have a good rest of your day. Thanks for stopping on in.